Hello, everybody, and welcome to Silent Podcast, the place where everything but silent. Back again with the Bounce Checks crew. Yes, we got Katie, myself, and Josie here to talk about some Big Brother 24, another exit interview. We have the second place of Big Brother 24, Monte here. Monte, what's going on, man?
Hey, nice to meet everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm out on the West Coast enjoying the good weather, man. I'm doing well.
Good, man. Good. You're from Delaware. I'm from the same area, so I was like, all right, cool. We got another Delawarean on TV finally.
Are you from Delaware too?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
So
wow, man.
locked
This is
in, man.
this is a rare occurrence right here.
So we just have a couple questions, obviously. Just to open up. Just want to ask, so obviously, you're second place. That's no easy feat. You are a part of the first, no, not even the first, the second All Black Final Two. So how does it feel, man?
Oh no, it feels great. I mean, I love the fact that I was a part of something so special this year. Not only in a great season that did very well as far as viewerships and just followership, but also to make history. I mean, I had told Amira, I think in the first week when we were working in the same alliance around forming a final two, I said, if I'm going to lose to anybody, I would love to lose to a Black woman and make history this year. I guess I spoke that into existence, and with Taylor, she came through and took home the win. So I'm very proud of her. And I've also come to learn a lot more about her story after getting out of the house and after seeing, the perspective of the fans, but also, some of the raw footage that I wasn't in those rooms and I didn't hear those conversations. And unfortunately was moving with ignorance at sometimes. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind of learning a lot.
Yeah, like this is definitely. I mean, I'm gonna let her talk. Like this is like our thing is we're everything but silent. So like we're this is definitely like a platform to talk about all that. But I know my two ladies here, they have a lot of questions. So go ahead, Josie. I know you have a first one.
Yes. Okay. So I'm glad that we kind of opened that conversation. I really want this interview to kind of be an open discussion and dialogue on specific items so that you can kind of have that platform to actually discuss points that are important. Obviously, we're going to talk about game, but a lot of us as podcasters, we represent different communities. And so we really want to have these conversations because we deem that they are important. And we create somewhat of a space to have these conversations. So I would love to really just like engage in that with you. And we're coming in just to allow you to have that opportunity to do that. So I've done my research and I'm going to just reference like an interview we did with Sharon from Us Weekly when discussing the points regarding some of the comments in the beginning of the season. You said you didn't remember, which is fair as you spent 85 days in the house. So you were just stepping back into reality when you were having that conversation with her. However, you've kind of now had a little bit of time to set back into real life or somewhat of real life now that things have changed for you, obviously, with the game. I'm curious if you were able to see what you had said and had time to reflect on it.
Yeah. So for me, I'm always going to do what's best for me and take my time throughout that process. I have not gone to look for that stuff. Not as of right now. First of all, I just haven't had the time, to be honest with you, to just sit down and do that stuff. But also, I would say that I've been warned and have heard a lot of things about Twitter and about what type of environment that could be. And it seemed as if there were a lot more negativity on there than it was around positivity and encouragement. So I won't choose to go into a space of negativity if I can help for my mental sanity, right? So, but I have been told and I have been informed by other people who have been in those spaces and have shown me certain things here and there. I still haven't seen a lot that I have said or done, but I've heard about it. And I think it is something that's pretty, it brings a lot of awareness to me around, some of the things that I was doing in the game in order to advance, in order to, do whatever I needed to be safe that week. But, I've been able to have conversations with people who I may have been talking about, specifically with Taylor, around some of those things, what I was thinking at that time, the misinformation I was just operating on. And even I told her this during the Big Brochella Dire Fest split. I was like, once we started talking about more of what she had experienced and what people were telling her, I felt like such an idiot because I was like, I was just moving on the wrong info. So we started had those convos, and I've started to hear about what people have said I've done, but I haven't watched it myself.
I know, obviously, as you said, Monty, and thank you for addressing that you've had a lot of conversations face to face, specifically with Taylor. And, you know, of course, there are definitely a lot of loud voices on Twitter for sure. But I think there are definitely still a lot of people who are watching the show and the feeds who probably assume that you've had those conversations face to face, but would also just like you to speak on some of the comments that were made inside the house that may have been rooted in misogyny. I think a few examples, since I know you haven't had a chance to really go back and see a lot of it. There were a few things in the bathtub where you had mentioned, in the bathtub conversation with Taylor, where you had mentioned you were going to be harsher on her if the cameras weren't on. There was a comment that was made about referring to women as damaged goods after being in maybe like a bad or negative relationship or abusive relationship with men. It did seem at times that, you know, whenever Taylor maybe let her confidence or her dry side show, that was something that didn't really sit super well with you. So I just want to see, like, is there anything when people maybe say like Monty may have a hint of misogyny within him or some of these conversations that have happened, is there anything you would like to say to those people or anything that you would like to address there?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the conversations that, especially towards the tail end of the season, that one bathroom conversation, if anybody knows me, and this is why I've talked to my family and have worked through a lot of like what they've seen and their perspective, because I think if you know me, if my natural reaction was not out of love, I just wouldn't have never brought it up at all. If I didn't care about Taylor, I wouldn't have said anything at all, because I just would have ignored the situation. I would have created distance and I would have moved on in that way. That's just how I would be if I did not care. In that moment when I was saying I would have been harsher, I've come to realize that I think I was just emotional and I was hurt in that moment. Like, I don't even remember saying it. So, you know, I appreciate people holding me accountable to the words that I have. But I think when I was saying that in the moment, I immaturely probably wanted her to feel the hurt or feel the annoying feeling that I felt, you know, was being, you know, directed towards me initially with the comments about my goddaughter and the whole headphone thing. So, you know, I own up to that and I acknowledge that. Taylor and I have still not gotten to that conversation yet. We've talked about most of stuff from earlier in the season. So I think that that's still something that we can work through, and especially now that our conversation isn't perhaps jaded by game, you know, like how honest and how transparent can you be when you're in a house where if you say something that could, you know, lead you to being evicted, then that's a huge L for your game. So for me, I feel like maybe she was probably thinking the same thing, where she maybe had some thoughts that she held close to her chest that she maybe didn't want to share at that moment, respectfully so. But I think I then started realizing that this conversation can't be held in full on a 24/7 live feed in front of millions of people. This is something that I feel like we need to have one-on-one, you know, between the two of us.
Okay, I want to also talk about I think a big shifting moment in the game. Obviously, I had mentioned this in a previous interview that we did with Taylor, but I wanted to hear your perspective on the matter of the alleged Cookout 2.0 situation that was brought up. Obviously, the timing and the content was very interesting for what the reveal. I'm curious how you felt before, during, and after that, I guess, for lack of a better word, bomb was released. As feeds kept coming in and through, and I really am curious, because I think in comparison, in contrast to I would say Taylor, you were in the pound with these guys. You know, you had a lot of your gameplay really more connected with them than like per se like Taylor or anyone else. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I can, you know, I remember it like it was yesterday. Like after we got out of when we came back from the house split, there was a lot of, you know, stuff said about Joseph and how crazy he went. And there was a lot of things that I was noticing about Kyle, more around Kyle than around Turner. I think Turner was maybe going along with some things in my perspective at that time, but I just noticed that Kyle would, you know, sort of tell me things at very selective times, like, and forming this alliance over there in Direfest and pretty much just presenting to me like, yo, you down? Like, I just never felt good about that. So I already had some mistrust there, but then the information that they came back with about, Taylor, Brittany, Michael, and Joseph having a Final Four, like that to me also created mistrust with Taylor, Brittany, Michael, because I felt like that wasn't information shared with me before Dyer Fest, before Big Bochella. So I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, to say the least. So I looked at it and like, all right, I don't know who I can really trust. That's what my thought was going into it. I thought I would have been put up on the block once Michael won the power veto and took down Brittany. But I'll say that once that information came out, in the middle of that conversation, I was finding myself questioning a lot of things, not even about Kyle, but more around Michael and Brittany and their timing and sharing that information. Just because we had spent the whole last week in isolation, the five of us, we could have talked about this right then and there. We could have even talked about it right when it was happening the week before. So that was going through my head. I was also thinking about, what does this actually mean for the game? And then when Michael and Brittany proposed that they bring this to Turner and pretty much use it as a way to leverage putting up Kyle on the block, that's when I started to realize, okay, this is not being shared out of, the goodness of one's heart. This is being shared as a game move. So that's what I was thinking at that time. Kyle brought Terrence and I up to the Have Not room. I don't even know if y'all saw it. I've heard some things around certain pieces of live feeds.
Bits and pieces.
Yeah. Would have saw the whole thing. Terrence and I were not holding back on how upset and maybe disgusted we were with him not maybe owning up to his thoughts being rooted in race during that conversation. And then probably what you guys saw was maybe some form of the round table conversation in the living room, and then the one-on-one conversation that I had with Kyle afterwards, where he had already admitted to his thoughts being rooted in race and some of his actions being rooted in that as well. And that's when then that conversation came about. So yeah, it was weird. If you're asking how I was feeling, but I think that we handled it in a very mature way and a very progressive way, where it could be an example for people that, like, you don't have to react with violence. You don't have to react with yelling and screaming. You can have some real honest conversations around, what the hell were you thinking when you did this and when you said this, and why now? So yeah, I think that's how I felt throughout that time.
Just a quick question before they continue. Have you spoken to Kyle since the game, or no?
Yeah, we've not one-on-one and not to any extent.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give him his time because he's probably dealing with whatever he needs to mentally. And I know we had our conversation right after everything surfaced, but I don't know what's happened since jury. I don't know what's happened for everything that he's received from social media too.
Gotcha. I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask the same and just see if you think that he really is committed to kind of those conversations that you had around like learning and growing, or do you think maybe he'll just kind of recede back into that? Seems like he's back on TikTok, he's back on social media. There's a lot of people throwing support at him, probably for a lot of the wrong reasons, right? Do you think that maybe he'll let that echo chamber get to him, or do you think, based on the conversations you had with him in the house, that he's going to be able to really kind of like see through all of that blurriness and really be able to grow and learn from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would hope. That's my hope.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit here and predict one thing or another.
Mm-hmm.
I've only known a version of Kyle, in the house, right? So again, that's all jaded by game. Like, he could have been one way in the house. He could have been saying certain things in the house in order to make people feel a certain way, and which is all respectable, right? You got to make those moves in order to advance. But outside of the house, actions speak louder than words. And I've always been like that, even in the house, where that's what I judge. I don't judge what people say. I judge what people do. So we'll see what he does.
Yeah. And even just to bring that back to game really quickly, did you know that Kyle was pushing you as the backdoor target that week when I guess it was Michael who won the veto? He was pulling Brittany down. Were you made aware of that at that time, or is that kind of newer information?
I was made aware of that right after. So Turner and I had talked about, because once I think Kyle exposed the fact that him and Turner had a final two, and Turner just, the guy that he is, he's like, yo, what the hell, dude? Like, what are you doing putting my game out there? That was so unnecessary. So then he and I had a conversation, and that's where, he proposed a final two to me, right after that information had surfaced. And he was like, yeah, Kyle, did, want you to be the backdoor option.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about your game, because I love this game and I would love one day to play. Well, at least the Canadian version, but being as I'm Canadian. But I'm curious to know, how much did you think your identity as a black man was going to be a part of the game? I feel like, we can look at the game and be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to navigate the game as myself. But there are other people who don't view you as just Monte and your personality. They view how built you are, how tall you are, your race and stuff like that. So I'm curious, had you thought about that prior to going into the game? And how do you think that evolved maybe your strategy navigating the game?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the world that I live in. Naturally, when I walk around, I know that I get certain looks because of my skin color, because of my build. People make assumptions about my profession. I've been dealing with this my whole life, and the one thing that's always motivated me is giving everybody that moment where I'm like, I'm actually something else. You know what I mean? That to me is a big motivator. So while I was in the house, I could have assumed that people would naturally think that, but I knew that if I were to just be myself and, stay true to whatever it was that I was within me before the house, then that's all that I got, right? I don't think I came in with a strategy to act a certain way or to lay off of my intelligence to feed into that. I just couldn't. I don't know what it is. I'm just not good at that. And you guys have probably saw, I'm not the best when it comes to, that sort of thing. But yeah, I just tried to stay true to myself. But I also realized that, especially with last season, I am so glad and so proud of the way the Cookout executed their game to make sure that that mission was accomplished, that an African-American would win season 23 of Big Brother. Conversely, that also puts pressure on everybody afterwards who comes into any other season, to where people are now going to expect that you're going to work with other Black folks in the house or other people of color. And now you almost have to play a game of possum, oh no, I would never do such a thing, even when you may have intentions of doing that to support, people within your community. So I think a lot of the times, when I thought about that, I wanted to put that thought to rest as much as possible with others in the house, but still maintaining good relationships with just people that I trusted. It didn't matter what you look like or what your gender was, what your sexual orientation was. If I could trust you, I could trust you. That's just how I operated.
I'm gonna do a quick follow-up. Do you feel like you had to make kind of that space between specific people? I know that in the beginning of the game, we were at least curious on the Nicole, Amira, and you dynamic, especially in contrast with Taylor. And as the game navigated forward, sometimes we would hear you say as a Black man before saying something about Taylor. So I'm just curious, did you feel like you had to do that? Or were you just not thinking of how that could look from an outsider's perspective? Because I know that the Cookout did a lot for our community, but did you feel like you had to create big distinctions? And within that, I'm really just curious to know.
Yeah, I don't think I was very conscious of that, in that moment, especially that week. I will tell you straight up and down that I felt as though a person had lied to me based off of the experience and the interactions that I've had with people that I felt like I could trust at that time. And I was just going based off of evidence, right? That conversation with Taylor, where she told me about Paloma, was the first conversation we had about game after 4 or 5 days in the house. Meanwhile, I'd walked in with Paloma. We had talked about game. We were forming alliances. She was bringing information to me. I was bringing information to her. So it just, again, just purely looked at, how can I trust one person over another? And that's the assumption that I led to. In that assumption, I now believe that somebody had created a lie to either stir up my game. I started going through all these theories of why this person would do this thing. And it came down to feeling all right, I'm upset and people are asking me, am I fine with this? And in order to give them reassurances, I probably said things that I shouldn't have said in order to give them reassurances about how I felt about that game move. But to me, I, unfortunately, and maybe I should have considered it more, race, again, gender, sexual orientation wasn't a part of my thought. I was thinking about these people who I'm in this house with and the experiences that I've had with them. If I'm wrong for that, then I'm wrong for that. But that's just my thought process at the time.
No, I don't think you're wrong for that. I really don't. It's just more so, I think maybe your perspective, you're viewing people as human beings more so, but some people who are usually in more of a power position in society don't look at that like that, because they have the luxury of, their privilege. So yeah. I do understand a little bit more, and I'm glad that you spoke on this. I know, Isaiah, you have a point to say.
It was a completely different question. I was gonna say, because touched on Paloma a little bit. What was the session with Paloma? Because like there was like the whole prayer circle thing, and then like the Paloma Alliance like being a theme. I was curious about that. I was like, I gotta ask Monte about that. So like, what was it about Paloma? Because it felt like everyone was like taking her word as gospel, and she was like this younger girl. I mean, obviously, you guys, I'm not aware of what you guys know now, but at the time, you guys didn't seem to be fully aware of like what she was doing and all that stuff. So like, what was it about her that kind of made like you and like everyone else like kind of like follow behind her?
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, I think she was just somebody who was talking to everybody in the house and forming alliances with everybody. She probably made a lot of people feel good just by the way she communicated with people. And I know I connected with her early on about mindset, the fact that she was so young and had read similar books to me. Like, we had just as people, we had connected on a lot of things. Plus, on top of that, we walked in together, with Kyle and Jasmine, and had started talking game very early and often. And a lot of stuff that, like, you guys could look back at it. I never proposed a damn thing, right? Like, everything that had come into my plate was something that somebody had proposed to me. So Paloma had proposed an alliance with Pooch, Alyssa, myself, and it started from there. Even the prayer thing, like, to me, I think that mental health, I don't care who it was, I would have wanted to pray for whatever person was in that situation, regardless of who it was. So to see that, her act a certain way coming in, and then to see her slowly start to act very differently, and to a point where it was a bit concerning. Like, if you were in the house and you saw the conversations and how they progressed into less stable ones, you would have probably been pretty concerned too. So that's how I felt about that. The whole pose pack thing, I don't know why they wanted to call it pose pack, whatever the hell. I mean, honestly, I wasn't a part of that either. And, I guess people were having fun with names, but I was trying to call it something else the entire time. But, CBS wouldn't approve of it. But
was that Mamba?
Oh, so you did see that?
We saw it on the feeds. Yeah, we saw it on the feeds.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they blur that.
No, that we did see. We did see that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, season 24, in honor of Kobe and Gigi. I thought that would have been cool, but I'll be damned.
Yeah, no, we supported that for sure. It's funny that you say that about the post pack, because like even mid-season almost, when Daniel was still there, it was just a lot of like, I can't wait to get out of this house and like go see Paloma. So it definitely got a little weird, it seemed like. And since I brought up Daniel, I do want to ask you, I know you obviously had a little bit, or Daniel had a tiff with you. I don't want to say you had a tiff with Daniel, because I was really led by Daniel. We obviously also saw him go off on Taylor. What were your thoughts in those moments in the season? Because those were kind of wild for us to watch. And then have you had a conversation with Daniel since then? I know, Taylor mentioned to us that he just gave her a hug at the finale. They haven't really spoken. Have you spoken to Daniel since then?
Well, I answered that question first, and then around my thoughts around Daniel. No, I haven't had any conversations one-on-one with Daniel. Same thing, like, sort of hi and bye, hug. Mm-hmm. Good to see you at the after party on finale night. My thoughts on Daniel, again, like, I can only think about what I saw in the house and what could have been affecting his decisions. He seemed like he was somebody who, whenever he felt very strongly about someone, he would react in a very emotional way, in a very passionate way. And sometimes he would lose his temper in those reactions. It seemed like a lot of it was rooted in trying to protect someone like Nicole or whatever have you. With me, I thought that it was very intentional, that he wanted to shift the target to me, and he wanted to spur some sort of reaction out of my behind to get me to be the target the following week, which did sort of work, because people did throw my name out there for the following weeks afterwards. But at the same time, I think he just made himself look like more crazy by the way he went about it. And again, as being a Black man in America, I don't have the luxury of, being emotional in that moment or responding how I really want to respond. So I just, entertained the conversation, addressed it, but, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of having me riled up by it. So.
I was gonna ask, so kind of like dialing back to the Taylor thing. So I mean, obviously, like you said, like you haven't been able to like watch everything, obviously. So when you do get like the opportunity to like obviously see everything, because obviously the show's not going to show every detail. There's live feeds and everything.
Yeah.
I know Twitter is a crazy place, but there are like threads in there that kind of like show certain things that weren't on the show. But like obviously, once you get the opportunity to like see everything, and obviously you guys are going to have your conversation in private. Like, do you think you would like address it publicly at any point, or just keep it in like a private in-house thing? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, what I care about is, if I've hurt someone, addressing it with them and, making sure that everything is completely understood from both parties on that front. So, I'm sure all the fans that love Taylor want me to go and do certain things for them. But unfortunately, I'm going to do what is best for my relationship with Taylor. And that's really what I care about. So I don't feel a need to be very public about it or whatever have you. If Taylor wants to speak about it, then that's completely fine. And I'll tell you guys if I've had those conversations, but who I need to apologize is to Taylor, if anything, if there's anything that I hurt her for. So, and also I would say that, being in that house, and again, there's always a perspective on game being played. I think there's a lot that I could explain to her that she could understand in being in that house, that people who've never been in that house, never experienced being, socially disconnected from the world, physically disconnected from the world, having to fight for your life every week to hope that you are not evicted, like that sort of stuff she can understand. Whereas I'm not sure if a lot of people can understand afterwards.
Totally. I will say this real quick. I think there may be a lot of passion. I'm saying this because we're technically from Twitter, but I think there's a lot of but I will say that I think when people see a cast like Big Brother and they see people who look like them. So Isaiah's from the same area as you. So Isaiah could want to identify with you specifically and see how you navigate the game. So there's more of a connection or wanting to support you. And for me, in this case, it would be someone like Taylor who I identify with, you know what I mean? So when people are seeing specific comments being said, not just you, but by other people, sometimes they can see themselves within those comments. Like I can see myself in some of the things that people say. Taylor's a lot more gracious than I am. I'll tell you that right now. She's so strong and stuff like that. So I do think that's where a lot of people may come into it, because they're seeing a Black woman. It could be their sister, their mother, themselves in that. And that's why there may be a little bit of passion. Now, with that being said, I don't expect you to go at everyone's and say, I'm sorry. Like, I don't expect that at all. But I do think that's why maybe a lot of people feel this way, because they see themselves in that. And that's why maybe people are like, oh, we would just want to know that at least they had that conversation, or that they've moved on, because, it happened on a public platform. And so everyone kind of saw it. And so that's why people may feel that way. So I do want to give a little bit of back to Twitter. But aside from that, I do want to talk about Final Three.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, Turner had evicted Alyssa, and he had expressed how he was frustrated that Alyssa couldn't separate personal from game.
Yeah.
And then you evicted Turner, and he asked you why he should vote for you. And I was hoping that you would mention that Alyssa thing, because he did complain to you about it. I'm curious, what was going through your head when Turner asked that question? Like, were you still frazzled by being in the final two with Taylor? Did you already shift and kind of have a feeling about where the jury was headed in voting for Taylor in that regard?
Yeah, no, I had no idea that the jury would be very much on Taylor's side as far as a vote by that point. And in that question, when he asked, I felt like it could have been asked, but I don't think I was very well prepared for it in my mind. I think my explanation when I put out the vote or when I decided to evict him. I thought that's all I would probably have to say about it. But I was just hoping that he would at least respect the game move, right? Like everybody in that jury, like I said, have been fans of the show. And I thought that the only thing I was missing from my resume was making that big game move. So, me trying to justify it with him and, explaining like how things came to be with our final two versus, me working with Taylor. I think that was something that I felt like I could say to maybe try to make him feel better about it. But the reality was that under any circumstances, I think I probably would have had to make that move in order to make sure that I felt I had the best chances of winning.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Monte, I think we're close to out of time. I think we just want to wrap up and ask what's next for you. There's rumors that maybe there's a podcast coming, or your fitness app. Like what do you have coming down for you? Are you heading back to Delaware? Are you staying on the West Coast? What's next?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to stay out in the West Coast just for the vibes, for the weather, of course. But at the same time, I have family that I have to see. So I've been handling like a lot of PR stuff and, taking advantage of opportunities while I'm here. But I do want to get back to the East Coast and at least spend a week or two out there before I do anything back in LA. But yes, the online fitness coaching, business, I want to get that up and running. I want to support the clients that I wasn't able to support this summer, and also a bunch of new clients that want to work with me. So I'm excited about that. And that's Tailored Fit. So if anybody's interested, follow me at TAYLORD_FIT_ if you're interested in coaching. But then with the podcast, that has been something that I've cemented in my mind while being in this house. To me, that is like my life's work that I feel like I'm supposed to do at some point, because I really want to encourage people to make that leap, take that jump off of whatever ledge they're thinking about jumping off of. Because if you're passionate about something, if you want something deep down in your heart, and you're scared of doing it because of what other people think or because you don't believe in yourself, I want to talk to those people. I want to work them off of the ledge so that they can jump. But then I also want to give examples of people who have made that jump and share those examples so that it becomes more real. So I would love to do that a lot. So that is going to be my plan moving forward.
All right, Monty, thanks for talking to us, man. It's, good conversation and everything, and hopefully I run into you in Delaware or something. Who knows? But
sure. Yeah, let's hit Main Street. Let's do something,
bro. I'm down the street, bro. I already know.
All right. That sounds good.
But all right, until next time, have a good one. Bye.
Thanks for the time, y'all.